Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, SoapBox edition. In this podcast, we take you behind the scenes in the Cold Fusion community. We'll talk to the leaders about what they're working on to push the language forward with tools, frameworks, modules, lessons learned, and best practices. Well, welcome back to another Modernize or Die SoapBox edition podcast. Today, I'm lucky enough to have Pete Freitag with me for episode 4. So, Pete, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, always good to have Pete. He's a good community member and done a lot of great things. So let's do the background. So obviously I've known you for a little while now, but when did you start working with Cold Fusion?
Let's see. It had to be in maybe 98, maybe. I think going back that far. It was Cold Fusion 3. And I started, I was actually like a senior in high school or something like that. And I was starting to get interested in web development. And so I went to a local web development company and asked if they needed any help. So I kind of worked as like an unpaid intern initially, and they were happy to have me and to do that stuff for free. And what they were using was Cold Fusion. So that's kind of where I picked up Cold Fusion from. So it was Cold Fusion 3.0 at the time. And yeah, I just really enjoyed working with it.
Cool. Yeah, I started back in 4.5 in college. And so, so obviously, was that your first programming experience, or did you do something before working with Cold Fusion?
So before I started with Cold Fusion, I was building websites. So I knew HTML and stuff like that. But as far as making them dynamic, I was using Perl at the time.
Oh, gosh.
Not fun. So to me at that time, a database was a text file with, type delimited fields for columns and, new lines for each row. And so then I'd write the script to parse through this database and it sort of worked. But then, once I learned what an actual database was and like SQL and all that stuff, it was really like, wow, this is so much easier.
Yeah, I remember Perl scripts. There's many a Perl script written, and yeah, it's like regex. It's like, yeah, it's really powerful if you remember how to use it and really get into it. But cool. So, the first time I really heard of from you and your work was when HackMyCF was on my radar. So that was like the first thing there. So when did you release HackMyCF? Do you remember?
So HackMyCF, I believe it was around 2010, maybe somewhere around there. That came out. So I think before HackMyCF, I released FuseGuard maybe in 2007 or 2008 or something like that. And so, so I started Foundeo in 2006. And so let's see. Yeah, so HackMyCF was actually initially started as a way to just I thought it would be a cool way to get some exposure about what problems you have on your server, and then maybe that might lead to some consulting or something like that. But then I kind of quickly realized that people actually find this super useful to know, what patches are missing and what their server looks like, kind of to the outside world. So then I started, building up as a product after that. So yeah, maybe it was 2009 where I initially built it, and then I decided I should make this into a project or a product around maybe 2010.
Okay, cool. So you started Foundeo, you said in 2006, and so why did you start that? Was it just a consulting company, or because obviously you've got a security focus these days, but how did it start?
Yeah.
And
I wanted to do, I like doing product development, and I started off doing mostly consulting, and as I was building up products, and now I still do a mix of both. But yeah, I wanted to be able to build products and services and stuff like that. And so having a company was kind of a necessary step in order to do all that. So that was kind of why I started back then.
Okay, cool. So obviously, you got FuseGuide, HackMyCF, but there's a lot of cool other tools out there that maybe people haven't heard of you lately with. So I know there's a couple that I use all the time. CF Docs, which is open source documents for all the engines, which is cool. And then Script.me is a cool product too. So when every time someone complains about tags or scripts or that big old battle like I don't do script or I don't do tags, and I like ScriptMe. So you want to tell me a little more about those, and if there's any others that I'm missing, because I know there's a couple other ones that you work with Ortus with as well, like I think ProfileBox, and so.
So I'll start with CF Docs, because that's been it's been a really good community project with over 100 community members that have contributed to that on GitHub. Let's see, CF Docs I started initially back, I'm sure you remember, Gavin, the like Cold Fusion 7 Macromedia Live Docs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, remember that?
Yeah.
And you want to look up the docs for like CF query or something like that, and it would load these frames, and it would take you about 10 seconds to load the actual documentation page. And so like initially I started just because like the URL to it was like some random generated integer for each different documentation page. So initially my thought was like, I want to be able to type cfdocs.org/CF query and have it take me to the correct page for CF query. So that's kind of how I started it. And then I think it was around like Cold Fusion 9, Adobe released their docs as a Creative Commons license.
Yep.
So I thought, I could take all the documentation and get rid of all the junk. Because I think it was still loading in frames or I don't know, had a lot of like extra JavaScript and stuff on each page. It was just kind of too slow for me to be like usable as a day-to-day reference. So I kind of just like republished their docs as just the HTML and put it in front of a CDN as well. So, or no, actually I didn't yet at that point. But then after that, I realized, it'd be nice to be able to make changes to the documentation, and there's always the examples always annoyed me that weren't documentation. And I felt like, your example should be something you can run easily, copy and paste it and run it. But eventually, if you look at CF Docs now, you can just click a button to run all the examples, which is really cool. Okay. Thanks to Abram's Try CF project.
Yep.
So that's kind of how the project had evolved over the years. And then once kind of I put it up on GitHub, that's when people started contributing to the documentation, making fixes to it, and just improving it. So it's been a fun project to work on, see it grow and see so many people using it.
That one was an interesting one too, because there's all sorts of battles after CF9 that when you would search for something, you'd get the CF9 version instead of CF10 or 11 or 2016, and then they would go down, and then they wouldn't be available. And so, I think you provided a faster interface, more in-depth details, and it was reliable, and you could pick the version. You could see which version stuff was running in, and, Adobe sort of had their siloed documentation, and so that's why I like to be able to look it up and say, oh, that's right, this version, this is where this came in and whatnot. And like, there's a script version, so I don't have to worry about how to figure out how to write that in script anymore or whatever. So that's pretty cool.
Think having like the minimum version was something I really wanted to have, as well as the engine support, things like that, which I know Adobe wasn't ever going to add, what version of Lucy supports this. And at the same time, Lucy wasn't really worried about what version of Adobe supports this. So it was like we needed a community project to kind of like get those two together and be able to look in one place and say, oh, this works in Cold Fusion 11 and Lucy 5 or something like that. Yep. And that wasn't really possible before that CFR to do easily.
Yeah, no, it's a great project. I know I've submitted some stuff. I usually try and submit examples at least. Anytime I use something I had to figure out wasn't there, I try and add it back. And it's like you said, over 100 people are contributing, and it's a great project. If you haven't checked it out, please do. And if you see something missing or something you don't think is right, there's pull requests available, or even just file an issue, and we can, as a community, look into it and try and get that updated. So yeah. but that's, like you said, just one of the projects. So what about ScriptMe? That was another one. That was more recent, right? A couple of years ago.
Yes, CF Script Me, or cfscript.me is the actual address. And so, yeah, what that does is that you can take some tag-based code and paste it into basically like a two-pane, split-pane editor window. And you can paste on the left side, you paste in your some code that maybe you've got written for in CFML using tag-based CFML. And then it will automatically convert on the other side of the window to the script-based version of it. So I don't know. I think it's kind of useful to be able to do that quickly, especially if you've got an app. There's a couple different use cases I think for it. Like one is like if you've got some code that you want to switch over to being some existing code that you want to switch over to being just script-based CFC or something like that. You can paste it in there and get a translation of it, and then start working with it and making sure everything looks good. So it kind of works pretty good for that. But I think it's also a good learning tool too. If like you're wondering like how do you do something in CF script and you're not sure, you can kind of just start typing and it will show you on the other side what it looks like. So I think it's kind of neat for that purpose.
Yeah, and a lot of examples around, especially if you find older code, is all tag-based too. And so if you just got an example, you can look at it in script and just figure out, oh, that's what they're doing here. Okay, that's what I need to add it to mine. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So that one's built on top of your parser that you were working on, right? So you got a parser built in there too. And so what else? I mean, you've got other tools. You want to run over a quick list? You probably don't have all day.
Yeah. I mean, I've built a lot of stuff over the years. I mean, I think you hit on what the biggest ones are at this point. But here and there, I'm always contributing to stuff, or if I build something that's useful, I'll put it up on GitHub. So, you could probably check out my github.com/Foundeo. I have a lot of stuff that I've put out there as open source, and but yeah, I think you hit the big ones.
Cool. Well, Into the Box keynote this year in Houston, Texas, you released, or maybe you announced it. So that was the first time I heard of it. But a new product you've been working on called Fixinator. So I think what we should do right now is we'll insert the clip from the keynote right here, and then after the clip, we can talk about it a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Senior Brad. Okay, so my company, Foundeo, has been building on Ortus tools for quite some time. Looking through Luis's history there, I think I was at the first Into the Box back in Minneapolis, and I've been to quite a few of them. I've been working with Command Box since probably one of the early betas. I know it was at least before version 1 came out. So Foundeo relies heavily on these Ortus tools, heavy use of test box to ensure the products that I build are working properly. Cold box and the Docker images are all going into the workflow every day. So I noticed some gaps though in some of the security tooling that's out there for CFML developers. So there wasn't anyone keeping track of what known vulnerabilities are in third-party packages, for one. So for example, like you might recall several years ago, the FCK editor had file upload vulnerabilities in it. There's all sorts of things like that it's hard to know. There's no easy way to check your code for all these things. So there wasn't any tools out there that could do this, and so I thought this would be a good opportunity for my company since it's focused on security. So you should have ways to be able to check for vulnerable dependencies in CFML like you can in other languages. So, and there were some existing code security tools out there, like Cold Fusion Builder's Security Analyzer, but they're very difficult to work with, expensive, almost impossible to put it into a continuous integration workflow, but very difficult nonetheless. And so driving all this is that unpatched vulnerabilities are really what leads to most security breaches. So it's something you need to pay attention to. So this is the new product that I've launched this year called Fixinator, which is fully built on Command Box. Let me jump out here real quick. Okay, I'm just going to bring up a command box here. So Fixinator is a command box command that you would just run install Fixinator. I've already done that on here. So I'm just going to go to okay, so this is a repository that I used for the training classes yesterday. I'm just going to go into a specific folder. I can type here. All right, I'll just run Fixinator against it. And what it's going to do is scanning that folder, and it's coming up with vulnerabilities in there. This one has some SQL injection vulnerabilities. So that's just kind of a basic idea. One of the cool features, though, is that you can do autofix. There's two modes. There's a prompt mode, and then there's like a I'm feeling lucky mode, where it just goes ahead and fixes it for you. I usually go with the prompt mode, but so you can see here, in this case, this ID is an integer, so I could just go number 2. In this case, yeah, we're on number 1 here. And so let's see if I do. See if that works. Right, so you can see here, this is the diff of what it just did. Replace that vulnerable line of code with a fixed line of code. So a couple other things that it can do is, I'll just open this up. I already generated a report here. Yeah, move this over. So you can make PDF reports, HTML reports, all that kind of stuff with it as well. Brad had mentioned the Audit Command. So if I just if I install something that I know has a vulnerability in it, now I can run audit against it. And what that's doing is it's scanning the box.json file looking for vulnerabilities in it. So you can see here, this particular version of Framework 1 had a cross-site scripting vulnerability in it. So it was able to pick that up and detect it as vulnerable. So where this all gets really, really cool is once you integrate it into continuous integration. I'm just going to show you a quick example of what that looks like. Okay. Let's see here. So there's guides for no matter what kind of source code repository you have going on. There's a way to integrate this into continuous integration. So every time you commit your code to your repository, Fixinator can be automatically run and scanning the results. So these just show you how you can actually set it up. And this is actually showing, like in Azure DevOps, it generates this nice report for you, showing and bringing you right to the vulnerable file within the once the CI runs and your build triggers, it will give you this full report. All right. Let me get back to Keynote here. It can, yeah. Yep. There we go. Okay. So, as I mentioned, it's a client built completely on top of command box. It can scan your code for security issues. And installing it is as simple as that. So if you want to build tools like this, it's super easy to do with command box. If you know CFML, that's all you need to know. You can start building really cool commands like this. So the decision to actually use command box ended up being a huge strategic win for the product because it really helped me get it out to market much faster. So another thing announcing here is community support for Fixinator. So if you maintain an open source project and would like to use this on your open source project, let me know. I'll get you access to the product. Also, free scanning of box.json files. I'll give you a community key where you can run it on box.json files, and it'll give you reports of vulnerable dependencies. So, and coming soon as well, Fixinator private package scanning in ForgeBox Pro and ForgeBox Enterprise. All right, thank you.
Okay, so that was the keynote from Into the Box in Houston, Texas, in May 2019. So there, you guys released Fixinator. So you want to tell us a little bit more about what Fixinator is?
Sure. So Fixinator is a tool that you can use to scan your Cold Fusion code and get back an idea of what types of security issues that might be in it. So some of the more unique features of it, in essence, it's a security scanner that will look at your code and find the issues. It's not there's other tools that can do that, but I think some of the focus areas are that I do a lot of Cold Fusion security consulting work, so I see a lot of different types of issues that end up causing security vulnerabilities. So I'm able to take kind of all that expertise, the real world expertise, and my hope is to try and bundle as much of that into the tool as I can over time. So it's a tool that's getting better, whereas I don't think you see a lot of improvement going on in other tools, at least in the CFML space.
I mean, obviously, as a consultant, you're probably using this tool every day, right? This is what you use now to make your job easier. So,
yeah,
I mean,
that was, yeah, I've been using it actually for a while before it was released to do my job. So I'd use this as a way to kind of look for issues within the application, and then I can vet it to make sure it actually is an issue or not. But so it's something I've been using for a while to do my day-to-day security work and consulting. But beyond that, so like I said, so it's a CFML security scanner that has some of the additional experience baked into it that I get from doing my work. Another unique feature is that it's able to look for known vulnerabilities in CFML libraries. So, for example, like the one I typically use, for example, because I think most people are aware of this one, is because of a lot of people might have gotten hacked with it back in the Cold Fusion 8 days, was the SDK editor file upload vulnerability, where they had something in the SDK editor code, like the file upload component allowed basically anybody to upload files to your server, so you could upload a CFM file and execute it and things like that.
I remember that one.
So yeah, there's a number of those things that have occurred over the years, and so I've kept track of a lot of those things. And so one of the things that the tool can do is look for these types of known vulnerable components in your code. And so I think that's a really key differentiator in the tool, and it's also like a super important area in terms of security, because if you look at the types of breaches that happen, I think some recent statistics say like around 60% of breaches are caused by known unpatched vulnerabilities. So something you could have just patched, but you didn't. And a lot of times those are like third-party components. Those tend to be very easy for the attacker to exploit, because they just can fire away at this known pattern, and when they get a hit back on the server, they're like, oh, okay, this is vulnerable. I know exactly how to exploit it. I can go in and do exactly what I need to do. So I think it's an important area as a developer to look at is, do we have known vulnerable components in our application, and trying to get rid of those as much as possible.
Okay.
So yeah.
So another. I was gonna say, the next thing that I thought was pretty cool is that you have the ability to fix it right in line.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of another unique feature that I don't think any other CFML security tools have, is that you can just say, like, let's say there's an SQL injection vulnerability in your code. You can run Fixinator and say autofix equals prompt, and it will say, all right, do you want to fix this as an integer or varchar or whatever the type of field is, and you can go through and with kind of the push of a button, fix the security vulnerability in your code. So
yeah, that's
like
pretty
you
cool.
could have 10 vulnerabilities that could totally take down your server, and you could fix them in like 30 seconds potentially. So I think that's kind of a cool, unique feature as well.
Yeah, that kind of blew me away. I was like, that is really cool.
Yeah, and that's an area that I'm working on. Like, it can be even better than it is right now, but it's already pretty useful, especially if you've got a lot of vulnerabilities, if you've got like some sort of legacy app that is riddled with excuse me, is riddled with security vulnerabilities that you kind of don't want to spend hours and hours and hours fixing. You might be able to go through it with a tool like this, and then go through and fix them. And what works really well too with this is if you've got it in version control already, and you run this fix with it, you could just look at the diff of all the changes that it's made, and you can say, okay, well that looks good to me, and you're good. So it's really easy to review all the changes that it's made if you've got version control on it.
I like that idea, and like I said, obviously Ortus, we're doing a lot of work with customers to try and help them, modernize and update their older apps to newer apps. And a lot of times we run our code checker, which is a tool that we've sort of built up on top of some other open source projects, and we've added our security rules and everything to it, and it identifies them and generates bug reports with line numbers and stuff, and you can filter it, which is pretty cool. But this just goes a step further and gives you those extra tools. So we're pretty excited about that. But you also mentioned in the keynote piece that a cool thing about this is built on command box, so we can run it from the CI too, right?
The fourth cool feature about it is that you can run it from within a continuous integration piece very easily. So when you have your code set up under version control, it's not very difficult to take it a step further and then set up continuous integration. So just to kind of maybe backtrack a little bit, if people aren't sure what CI is, basically you have some sort of trigger, and typically that trigger is just that you've committed code to the source code repository, and then that trigger causes some sort of script to run. And typically that script could be something like, it could be running tests or things like that. In the case of Fixinator, you have it run through and check your code for security vulnerabilities. Every time that you commit code, every time the code changes, it goes through and does all the security checks. And then it can actually, if you wanted to, you can fail the build at that point, and so that you have to go back and fix the security issue before you're allowed to deploy. So some people might want to work that way. Others might just want to be able to see the results of it each time it runs. But I think the important part about this is that when you're using CI, it makes the security part of it automatic. So you don't have to think about running it every single time. It's going to happen automatically, and you get those results.
So one question. So are there different levels of the vulnerability? So you could say, you know what, I want to fail if it's extreme or danger, but not if it's warning or info. Do you have different levels in your vulnerabilities? So
yeah, cool. Yeah. So there's a few different ways this could work. One way would be there's kind of two controls there. There's confidence level and a severity level. So the severity level is how severe is this vulnerability? Is it like a remote code execution, which might be a high severity, or is it something a little less critical? The other control is the confidence level, and that control kind of changes how false positives might show up within the results. So if you've got there's certain issues where when it's found in the code, you can't be totally sure that it's a security vulnerability or not. So those types of issues will get a lower confidence level. And then by default, it runs at a high confidence level. So it's only going to give you report back of stuff that is pretty sure is a vulnerability. So that's useful too, because with a lot of security tools, you're going to get a lot of issues coming up.
Okay. Well, it sounds like Fixinator sounds pretty awesome. It's a great product. And so where can they find out more about that and other products that you and Foundeo have?
So yeah, if you go to fixinator.app, you can find out more about Fixinator, and then just foundeo.com, you'll get all of the different products that my company makes, and can sign up for them all from there. So yeah.
Cool. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing great work, of course, and we always love your workshops, your security workshops, and everything else you do. So thanks again for everything you do for the community, and thanks for joining us here on the Soapbox edition.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Have a good one. Thank you. Show notes for this episode can be found on soapbox.modernizeordie.io, where you can also subscribe to iTunes, Spotify, Overcast, or your favorite podcast player, or a link to the YouTube channel for more of these videos. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.